You guys look like... What do they look like, Jimmy?
Dorks. They look like a couple of dorks.
Get those birds! Nerds! Nerds!
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
What? Are you kidding? We got some family here.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast. Here are Brad, Lisa, Brian, and Darren.
Welcome to another edition of the It Modcast podcast. Joining us is Brian Young, the Turtle Dork.
That man is playing Gallagher. That we wouldn't notice, but we did.
And also joining us is Lisa Gullickson, wife Dork.
Then give me one of those large enough to ride.
And Brad Gullickson, mouth Dork.
Let's do a head count here. Your brother, the demigod, a super soldier, a living legend who kind of lives up to the legend, a man with breathtaking anger management issues, a couple of master assassins, and you, big fella, you've managed to piss off every single one of them.
And I'm your host, Darren Smith, the Disco Dork. You want to know my secret, Cap? I'm always angry. And welcome to the It Modcast podcast review cast for the MCU Phase One.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
Because I know what you were thinking. You were thinking, those It Mod guys don't talk enough about Marvel movies.
And we're sorry. We genuinely are sorry. So
It's like church. We talk about it every Sunday.
Mm-hmm. And so we have the upcoming release this year of Avengers Infinity War. And like we do every year before the release of an Avengers film, I know you, Brad, do it because we start from the beginning and rewatch all of that previous phase. Do you always start from... So this one, you started from the very beginning. Well, this one you decided to start from the very beginning. But last year, did you start from the very beginning or just the beginning of the phase?
I always start from the very beginning. Usually what I do is in a much more compact time. So I'll watch the entire MCU within a month or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
This year, because the weeks line up perfectly, if you had started the first week of January with Iron Man and then the next week you watched The Incredible Hulk, you would watch 17 movies in 17 weeks. That's going to drop you right at the release of Infinity War on May 4th.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so we are at the end of Phase One, and we're here to talk about it.
Yeah, 10 years. In some ways, that seems like an incredibly long time.
It's really not.
Other ways, I feel like I just got out of the theater of Iron Man.
Yeah, I mean, I can still remember seeing Iron Man in theater. It was my birthday, actually. I saw it in 2008. So, yeah, I remember that. I had no idea what they were actually building at that time, going to see that film. Even with the post-credit scene, I mean, they hint at it in that post-credit scene, but even then, I don't think anybody could fathom what was to come years later.
So, originally, you did stay through that first
because
sequence?
I think even when Iron Man came out, there was rumblings about there's a post-credit scene at the end, so you might want to stay.
Yeah, I had it ruined for me through...
Really?
It probably wasn't Film Twitter at the time, but something like Film Twitter, whether it was a magazine or a podcast. Was I even listening to podcasts in 2008? I don't know.
I don't think they were invented.
But I
last year.
certainly had it spoiled for me, and I knew that Nick Fury was going to be in it, and I knew that Sam Jackson was going to be Nick Fury. And the reason that was so amazing to me was because Sam Jackson was cast as Nick Fury in the 2006 comic book series, The Ultimates. When they relaunched that new universe, they put Sam Jackson's likeness, or at least Brian Hitch put Sam Jackson's likeness into that comic book series. So that was like incredibly meta and rad. But were you like super stoked about the first Iron Man, Lisa? Like when you first saw it?
In 2008, no, I wouldn't say that I was super stoked. I did not know who Iron Man was. I had barely read a comic book. I had read Sandman.
We'd been dating for a year.
Yeah, I read Hellboy, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. So not any Marvel. So I was excited because I guess Brad was excited. I suppose. Did we know each other at that point?
Yeah,
But
we've
I
been
did.
dating for a year.
Okay. So yeah, I was excited because Brad was excited, but
It's interesting because I remember even prior to Iron Man coming out in 2008, and I'm sure we'll probably get into this later in the podcast, but there was always talks about Iron Man being made into a film, like because Tom Cruise was attached for years, like even in like the late 90s, early 2000s.
that's a weird alternate universe.
Yeah,
where Tom Cruise is Iron
in the
Man.
early 2000s, they kept, and he was attached for a long time. And I think this was even before they were building like a universe. And I just remember that always being in the back of my mind, like Tom Cruise is supposed to be playing Iron Man. And then, of course, I've recently heard stories about Tom Cruise wanted to have his face seen through the mask.
Sure, yeah.
So I was like, yeah, that definitely wouldn't have, and of course, when they cast Robert Downey Jr., that was like the big, the big conversation because of everything going through his past. And that was basically a risk for Jon Favreau to have to really, to cast him in that role, in a role like that, to have to carry this film.
My excitement around that first film was solely through Robert Downey Jr. Because
Really?
Iron Man was not a comic book character that I cared about growing up.
Yeah.
I did not read those comics. He would occasionally pop into comics I did read, like the Avengers or Captain America or Spider-Man or whatever.
Yeah.
But he was just not somebody that I was passionate about. But Robert Downey Jr., he was coming off of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang,
Yeah.
Zodiac.
So he was coming back. He was starting his comeback.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you first see Iron Man, really what you respond to is his performance as Tony Stark, because it really does play to his scallywag history and all of his strengths. I mean, he's so charming. Yeah. He is able to ride that line between scumbag, asshole, and I love that dude.
Yeah, which is tricky, which is really tricky to do, but he manages to do it, especially in this film.
What do you think is the closest estimation to the MCU we had at that point? Would it be the X-Men films?
I mean, the superhero genre certainly was relaunched with those X-Men movies. Probably, a lot of people say Blade, but Blade leading into X-Men, leading into the Spider-Man films.
Yeah.
A comic book renaissance, a cinematic renaissance occurred. But the idea of the end credits sequence coming in and Nick Fury saying, "Let me tell you about the Avengers Initiative." When you hear those words, that immediately becomes the most exciting thing about Jon Favreau's movie, at least for me. Yeah. Because they're promising you, we're going to get to Captain America, we're going to get to Thor, we're going to get to Doctor Strange, we're going to get to Black Panther. These are things you just did not think were ever possible as a comic book fan. And then this idea of a shared universe where we're going to have these separate movies and then they are going to link up at some point in the next couple of years. That was radical. And we knew they were going to do it because also in 2008 we had Incredible Hulk just a few months later.
Yeah.
So they were committed.
There was also had a scene that also tied in to Iron Man having Robert Downey Jr. at the end of that film. Although that wasn't a post-credit scene. That was just a tag at the end of the film.
I believe originally it was supposed to be a post-credit sequence, and then they pushed it up. Yeah. Incredible Hulk ends up being the only Marvel movie not to have a post-credit sequence.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, though.
But okay, so Iron Man.
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr., we all love him. Besides that, what are your thoughts on Favreau's film? We all just rewatched it.
I really enjoyed it. And what you were saying about Robert Downey Jr. playing this character, you really see that in that opening scene in the Humvee when he's talking to those soldiers.
And
like
he's got his scotch.
He's got his scotch. And you can see he's really charming, but he can kind of be kind of dickish or kind of into himself. But he does a great job of really playing that line. And I love that opening scene because it really established Tony Stark. The character and this portrayal, this version of Tony Stark that Robert Downey Jr. is going to be playing. So I love that opening sequence.
And that first Iron Man film is incredibly grounded in a reality something like ours. If you look at the first Iron Man film and you compare it to Iron Man 3 or Age of Ultron, there is a level of reality that has altered into a comic booky MCU universe. That first Iron Man, you don't feel that.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the obvious signs of, the early stages of the MCU. Not even, like you said, the promise of that post-credit sequences, we're going to get to Thor, we're going to get to a Doctor Strange. And I think at that point they had not necessarily cracked the nut on, having a character from a place called Asgard. How do we make that fit into what Jon Favreau is doing with Iron Man? Are people even going to respond to Iron Man to the point where we get the green light to do a Thor? And because, Marvel was trying to do something different with the superhero film, in that they were putting, if you think about it, they were putting huge talent behind the character of Tony Stark, even though he wasn't an A-list actor. And
they got him on a budget.
But he's a tremendous talent. When you look at Jon Favreau as a great storyteller and a capable storyteller, so I think
still an unknown quantity at that time. He had done Elf and he had done Zathura and Maid,
some smaller films,
but nothing like this.
Right. So even looking at the casting and who they had as on the crew, like as in Jon Favreau, it that in and of itself seemed like okay, well, we're going to take this bet, but we're going to be safe about it. So we're not going to try to get Scorsese or somebody to do the film. We're not going to we're going to ditch that idea of Tom Cruise, because we know what that would be if that's financially, if that was a bomb. Like if Iron Man didn't catch on.
Well, and also Tom Cruise had crazy non-comic book story ideas, right? And what's obvious about that first Iron Man is that Kevin Feige had full faith and commitment to what the brand was. And, he understood that if you look at the comic books, we have all this cool stuff. We just need to find a way to translate all this cool stuff onto the big screen, and the people will come.
Yeah.
I feel like Iron Man is the step that other franchises that are trying to copy the MCU template.
Yeah.
I feel like Iron Man is the step everybody's trying to skip and tripping over themselves. This foundation of simplicity, character first.
Take your time.
And taking your time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That everybody's trying to rush to some kind of big event and let's get the team together. Where we're all watching Iron Man and we go, what? There's going to be a team? Other franchises are trying to skip this step. And I wonder if this kind of magic can ever be captured again. That idea of, okay, we're going to start with this film, and this film is going to stand alone, but then be scaffolding for something bigger.
And that's the problem, I think, now with other studios, because Iron Man set that template and people are trying to copy that template, but they're trying to rush through it. I mean, we see it with DC, we see it with Universal Monsters and all these other studios trying to build universes, but not understanding what Marvel did with that first film. And even just Iron Man as a standalone film, he's not even really Iron Man for that whole film. He's only Iron Man for maybe half of the film towards the end of the movie. And that's actually, doing the rewatch, that's what I loved about the film, was when he was captive in that cage, and the relationship between him and Jensen.
Yeah.
I think that relationship really kind of grounded the character of Tony Stark and gave him some semblance of a moral compass as far as what his value, or what his whole thing,
his arc,
in this whole thing. So I thought that relationship between the two of them was really, really good.
So that's the crazy thing about the MCU, right?
Yeah.
Is that Tony's arc starts in Iron Man. It doesn't necessarily conclude with Iron Man. If Iron Man had been a one and done, and that was it was a failure, Marvel Studios never broke away from Paramount, and then we were done, right? You would have had a movie in which his arc was, he was a cocky, full of himself dude who made his money from weapons and military contracts, and he experiences a physical loss. He's wounded.
Yeah.
It traps him in that cave with Jensen. In that cave, he sees what his money is doing globally and what impact the Stark name is having on the planet Earth.
And for their enemies, for our enemies.
And for our enemies. Yeah. And he's disgusted by that. And so he's going to take his brain and try to do something positive on this planet. And, you know, his idea is taking this prosthesis, as he calls it in the second Iron Man, and turning that into a peace-keeping entity. And the arc ends with him going, I've done it. I was wrong before. I'm right now in my actions as Iron Man. I am Iron Man. The end. I've learned something.
Yeah.
But what you realize then going into Iron Man 2 and beyond is that he didn't really learn, you know, the moral right there. He's still struggling with what he should be doing on this planet all the way through Civil War and Spider-Man Homecoming. And that's what's exciting about the MCU.
And actually, rewatching the Phase One, I don't even think we've really gotten to the peak of his arc yet. I think that's coming in like Iron Man 3 and Age of Ultron, when we start to see the consequences of the actions that he starts to, you know, put forth. So I don't know, that's an interesting take, to see his arc start there. But yeah, it definitely, his journey continues throughout the whole MCU.
Because Iron Man 1 is really basically just an origin story as a superhero.
Yeah.
But I mean, I had barely ever seen superhero movies other than the X-Men films, kind of in a peripheral kind of way.
Yeah.
And I was like, this movie is cool and this guy is fun.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, I'll watch Iron Man 2, sure.
My
Spend more time
reaction
with this
to
dude.
it was, 2008, that's also the year that The Dark Knight happens, right?
Yeah.
And I was a big-time Nolan Batman Begins fan.
Oh, I had seen those.
And
I weirdly don't count them as superhero movies.
Exactly. and when Iron Man came out, I was just like, well, this is just an origin story. What's so special about that outside of the end credit sequence? And for me, Iron Man has only grown better in rewatches as in context with these other films.
Yeah. We talked about the Planet of the Apes, War for the Planet of the Apes, and how that film elevates the film before it. And another unique aspect of the MCU is how their films tend to function in the same way sometimes, even though the films before it aren't directly related to that film. Age of Ultron, going by what Brian was mentioning, if you use that as a not an endpoint but a marker on Tony's character arc, even if you just compare that to the beginning, and him saying in the cave, you know what, my intelligence, my money, and my ability, I've been using it, and it's being used to cause harm to this people of the earth. Let me give value and meaning to this intellect and do something good, like you mentioned. But then you look at Age of Ultron and what happens with that same mindset,
same idea, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then what happens with that, and how he has to, as a person, look in himself, find the error in that judgment, and then where does he use that decision to move forward? Is it, does it tie into his taking in, possibly Peter as a pupil and teaching him different, so it's all interesting stuff that starts,
But even like the idea that the position, because of everything that has happened, the position that that Iron Man takes in Iron Man 1, and the position that he takes in Captain America Civil War are like in direct conflict because of this journey of things are not being done right, so I will do it myself. I've done it myself and I fucked it up.
Well,
so clearly no one else can do it themselves. So like he does this complete 180.
Tony is all ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
He believes in the first film that my mind can solve any problem. And in Age of Ultron, that's still his same thought process. I'm going to put a blanket on this world. I'll fix this. I'll help the world. And he creates this, super evil AI. But then he doesn't learn the mistakes from that either. He still says, my brain will still fix this. We'll get this vision thing up and running and everything will be okay. And it's not until Civil War where he's like, okay, maybe I do need help.
Yeah, I take the power out of my hands and put it back in a government entity.
Right.
Because he feels the guilt.
Yes.
At that point, he feels the guilt of everything that he's done.
And even when he is in direct conflict with himself and things that he has said, you can follow the mental journey there. Mm-hmm. You can see, I can see why he would come to this conclusion. I could see why he would come to that conclusion because we've spent all of this time with him. Yeah. And we know now how Tony Stark would think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, there are certain scenes that you can watch in the first Iron Man. And if you're so inclined, if you're doing a rewatch or if you've rewatched any of the subsequent films in close proximity, I mean, there's certain scenes in the first Iron Man where, for me, on my most recent rewatch, like there was this, me knowing what was ahead of the character before that character in this film. It's one of those things where it's like bittersweet because, he wants to grow and he's going to change, but, little does he know, what he thinks is the right thing. Little does he know, like, how much of an impact that's going to have on the people that he thinks he's doing the right thing for. And it's just interesting to see, now that we know where that character is going to go back into the beginning and see him before that. And also with this, to see how much, like you said, Lisa, like before, he was thinking he can do it on his own. Now I'm thinking I can't do this on my own. Normally we'll get a rushed character arc like that within the confines of like an hour and a half, 2 hour film for someone. But with Tony being allowed to breathe and being allowed to bounce off of not just one or two characters, but different people. And like in Iron Man 3, his relationship with the kid and what that brings out of him versus what his relationship with Rhodey or Pepper brings out. Because, throughout these films, even though they only touch on it periodically, there's still this thing between he and Pepper that I think ties into who Tony Stark is, because she's really the only constant. His team isn't constant. His location isn't constant. His where he is physically, emotionally, mentally. But Pepper has always been there, and so I think that I'm going to be really curious to see how that relationship continues and develops into Infinity War and see what part she's played, because that's one of my favorite things about the third Iron Man film is her involvement in that story, and especially like the end scene. That was really fun, get to see her take part in the action. But just, I think that relationship is my favorite thing about the third Iron Man, seeing him deal with PTSD, but having someone there to go through that with him. And who's also affected by it. That was one of the things that on rewatch that always like sticks out to me. And so, but I really appreciate what they've done with Pepper's character. But Tony, he has, I don't know, like it's weird. It's almost not fair, because you do have other MCU characters like that we're going to get to, like the Hulk or like Captain America, like Thor. But Tony's is the one, and I guess it's only rightfully so since he was there at the beginning. But his seems to have the most threads that connect, and it seems like there's a lot more being done with Tony than with Thor.
I mean, maybe with Thor, I do think that the two major arcs that are happening through this current wave of MCU movies are Tony and Steve. Yeah, I think Steve also has a really interesting growth. Mental growth over the course of his three films as well.
But even looking at Steve, like look at Steve. In his first film, the first Avengers, which I'm kind of jumping ahead, he's ultimately dealing with becoming like the physical embodiment of all those things that he had within his heart and what he should do with that and fight for his country and not be selfish. Then at the end of that film, obviously the next time we see him, he's going to have to be dealing with being a person displaced in time.
And all his values being turned against him.
Right. And so we have that conflict, and then the thing with Bucky and also Civil War, which really is still a battle of conflicting values, I think. But with Tony, I mean, he's dealing with who he is as a person, how he treats other people, how he needs to like get over his ego, how
I think that's all happening with Steve too, though.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's...
And then Tony feeling like we talked about before. Tony feeling responsible for, all the Thanos shit. Like,
yeah. I mean, I think that Tony Stark has had more screen time within the MCU,
right?
And he has a really interesting character arc. But I do believe that Steve Rogers also has a really interesting character arc, and that's why when they finally come to clash in Civil War, it works so well, is because you have these two ideologies that have formed over the course of, in their cases, 4 movies each.
Yeah.
Or four movies for Iron Man and 3 movies for Cap before Civil War.
Yeah. Well, before we get to the first Avenger, we have Incredible Hulk, which is the oddity, the black sheep of the MCU, so to speak. In that this one is, I want to say, distributed by Universal, produced by Universal.
Yep.
Which they own the rights to the likeness and the name of Incredible Hulk.
Or they own the leasing rights for solo
films.
Hulk films. Yeah.
Right. So around this time we had the casting of Edward Norton, and for me personally, because I'm a fan of that actor, I was excited, and plus I wanted to see a different take on the character, because Ang Lee, like, his film,
it's weird.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's a weird film.
I appreciate the effort. I just wanted more from an Incredible Hulk film. So with the Louis Leterrier, is that his name?
Yeah.
The director of the Transporter films. When that name was announced, I was like, all right, well, at least there'll be more action in it. So I wasn't sure like what the story was going to be or how that'd be handled. But I was like, all right, you have a capable actor in Edward Norton, and you have a director who is known for like these outlandish like action films. So maybe the combination of the two will get us a good Hulk film. Let's talk about that Hulk film. What were your thoughts with how that felt in keeping with like what was started with Iron Man? Does it feel like, even now going back, outside of having our new and current Hulk be Mark Ruffalo, when you went back to this most recent rewatch, did it feel?
I think the Incredible Hulk feels a lot like what they were trying to do with Iron Man. I mean, It is a very grounded origin story. Now, the Incredible Hulk, I guess, could be argued as a more fanciful, fantastic character than Iron Man. There's a level of science fiction on display, that whole Jekyll Hyde thing.
Yeah.
But Edward Norton and I think Louis Leterrier were more interested in the Hulk from the Lou Ferrigno television
70s,
series.
Yeah. And that's what I picked up on watching it.
Right.
Yeah.
And, there are obviously musical cues.
Yeah.
There's a cameo by Ferrigno. But there's also this idea of Banner on the run, helping people as he gets trapped in a certain community. So he's in South America at the start of this film.
Yeah.
He's working in a soda factory. And this leads to like my favorite Stan Lee cameo of the entire MCU, I believe.
Really?
It's where his blood accidentally gets into one of the bottles, and you cut to Stan Lee in America drinking one of these neon green sodas and going, oh, wow, that has a kick. And that's how General Ross learns that Edward Norton's Banner is down in South America, and then that's when they send Tim Roth and all those goons his way.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good little action movie.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what I liked about it, is the fact that it doesn't feel like it's part of the MCU. Because, I don't know, that's one thing that I've kind of gravitated to more and more, especially now as the MCU goes along, is that I really gravitate more to these individual character stories than more the team-up films. And I like that this movie feels kind of outside of the whole build-up of the MCU. Of course, we do get the tie-in at the end.
Why even have the MCU, Brian, if all you want are solo stories?
Well, no, I like this but I like getting deeper into the characterization of these characters that we've grown to love, and I like the fact that it does kind of harken back to the '70s TV show, the Lou Ferrigno show, with those musical cues, because that was a show I watched as a kid. So it was nice to kind of. What?
I'm just thinking.
It was So it was nice to kind of like hear that and really have them kind of pay homage to that kind of stuff. So I really kind of gravitated towards that, and I like the cast. I like what's his name, William Hurt. I thought he was really good as Thunderbolt Ross, and Liv Tyler. She's good. She's good.
Liv Tyler does not have much to do in the movie.
She doesn't. She doesn't really have a lot to do.
To me, like, the Incredible Hulk feels more like a movie, where the other chapters of the MCU feel more like events. You know, like, to me, even with the more fanciful element of him hulking out and all of that, it's still it as a film felt extremely conventional.
It still feels like a Hulk movie made by people who don't quite love the Hulk in the comics, right?
Or apologizing for who Hulk is.
Right.
Going, we need to repackage this character to make it appeal to a larger audience, which as Marvel has proved again and again and again, just makes something more bland and less interesting to me.
And the story that they're telling is Banner has this monster inside him and he's terrified to let it out. And that is every version of the Hulk we've been given in live action media so far. And what eventually happens with this character through Darren's quote, you know, the secret is I'm always angry, is and by the end of this film, Banner having control or some control over this transformation.
Not control, but like a sense of purpose about the transformation.
Yeah.
Like, let's aim it.
Yeah.
And Hulk really is, or should be, a separate character to Banner. And that's what we finally get in Thor Ragnarok, is you have two very different personalities in Hulk and Banner. And that's what I want to see. I don't want to see the Jekyll and Hyde keep it stuffed in
But again,
story.
I think that's something we have to build up too.
Yeah. But the problem is we build up to it through a television series and through a previous Ang Lee Hulk film. And Marvel had an opportunity here where they could have gotten to that idea sooner rather than telling kind of a repeat of previous stories. And that for me, that's why I don't love Incredible Hulk as much as what's coming. And it's what keeps Incredible Hulk and Iron Man as these starter films on a particular level, and while they'll always be at the bottom of my MCU rankings, because really what I want to get to, Brian, is the Avengers, is Doctor Strange, is Black Panther, are these wilder comic booky concepts, and that's not what we have in Iron Man and Hulk.
Okay.
But it's not their fault.
Interesting.
Because there are viewers like me who's like, all I've read is Neil Gaiman, you know, like,
Right.
so I needed those origin films.
And they're not garbage movies. There's not a single
I did not watch
MCU
the Lou
film
Ferrigno
that
show.
I didn't like. You know, even the Dark World. I have a good time with the Dark World.
Yeah. No.
I fucking love Thor Dark World. I like it better than the first one.
No, boo.
Yeah. So the next film, is it Thor?
Yeah, it's Thor.
Yes. Oh, and just having recently watched Kenneth Branagh's film, Brad and Brian and Lisa also recently rewatched that one as well. I have to echo what Turtle Dork said. But this was always the case for me. Like, I always loved the stuff on Asgard. Like the humor of the film felt flat to me. And it used to be when there was only Phase One and maybe into Phase Two. For me, it used to be I didn't like Thor because Marvel's injection of humor into it.
Shit, you know what? It's actually not Thor. It's Iron Man 2. But we can stick with Thor and then go back to Iron Man 2.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah,
everyone forgets about Iron Man 2.
Which I really like Iron Man 2.
We'll get to it. We'll talk Thor first.
All right.
We're going to skip the chronological order.
Okay. So, but with Thor, like I always did not that the humor, not that I was upset that Marvel injected humor into the film where I felt like it should have been a serious character. It's just that type of humor, that language of humor, the comedian telling that joke, I just didn't find funny, because as Marvel would go on in later films to do is inject humor and levity. For whatever reason, like those particular times, like Ant-Man was funny to me, and it was supposed to be like so. And all the other beats,
I mean, the Marvel movies are very humorous.
yeah. And all those comedic beats, for the most part, that I can remember, all of them like either hit with me or landed just fine. But for whatever reason, I just like Thor, Kat Dennings, and like she just wasn't.
I loved her. I loved her in this movie.
Yeah.
I love her when she shows up in the other movies. I
like
think
her in the
she's
second
totally
one,
cute.
But for whatever reason, I don't know, like just the stuff they had her say. Like I love Kat Dennings. I love that character because like I said, I love her in the second film. But just like the stuff, like the writing just wasn't
to me. It feels like with the first Thor movie, the comedy feels easy. Like the whole fish out of water thing, especially with the character of Thor, it's almost like low hanging fruit. I mean, you know the comedy beats that you're going to get with that type of film.
Yeah, and it's great, Brian.
Well, that's the thing. When I first saw Thor, I wasn't really that impressed with the stuff on Asgard. When I originally saw it in 2010, going back
11.
now and 11. Sorry. Yeah, 10 was Iron Man 2. Yeah, 11.
Darren's fault.
Yeah. But going back now, I really connected more with the stuff on Asgard. And like I was saying before, like the Loki storyline. Loki has a very tragic story arc. Especially with him being taken from his home as being the child of a frost giant. I believe he was Laffy's child and being taken away. And again, having Kenneth Branagh direct that film, it feels very Shakespearean in that way. And I thought Tom Hiddleston did an amazing job, especially that one scene when he confronts Odin in the what's the room in the bottom where all he keeps
the
all
basement.
The treasure room. The treasure room. Yeah.
Yeah, the basement.
The champagne room?
And he confronts Odin, and Odin goes into like the
Cardiac arrest,
the all sleep, right before he goes into the all sleep, and he's yelling at Odin like, tell me. But there's so much like conflict, and the way Tom Hiddleston plays that is just.
So, I love the performances in Asgard. This scene in particular is great, and Hiddleston's amazing. And this film and all those scenes are all the more important in context of Avengers, Dark World, Ragnarok. It's impossible to watch Thor now and not focus on Loki's character.
Exactly. Yeah.
My problem with the Asgard stuff is outside of some key dramatic sequences, inside the Bifrost chamber, Odin casting Thor out. I don't love the world. I don't think it's as well realized as some of these fantasy realms would be in future MCUs, and hopefully what Wakanda will be. Like when you watch those trailers for Wakanda, you're like, that's a country.
Yeah.
I get the geography already just based on, a few trailers. Whereas you look at Thor, Dark World, and Ragnarok, I still don't understand what Asgard is. Like, who are the people of Asgard outside of these main characters?
Is there a back to Asgard? Because it only looks like it's the front.
Staged. I mean, it does feel staged.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me, the first Thor, it is the movie. It is the key critical film where the MCU is going to open up to crazier realms, pun intended. And you're either going to buy into Norse gods as aliens, or you're not. And if you don't, then we're never going to get to Guardians of the Galaxy.
It's a tough sell. They had a tough sell, and I think that doing it as a fish out of water
romantic comedy
rom-com was like a candy, like when you wrap Kuma's medicine and cheese. Like it's just like this tastes good.
I love the relationship between Thor and Jane Foster. I love her infatuation, her excitement over this being, over this, discovery. And I dig how Thor responds to that infatuation because it's something that he does not get on Asgard. Now, does Thor look a little cheap in New Mexico? Like you can see the strains of the budget, certainly.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And is the climax in New Mexico with the destroyer disappointing? Yeah. Okay.
But that's not what you remember about the film. Like when I'm like looking at the cast list, I'm going like, Thor, I love that guy. Jane Foster, I love her. Loki, he's the best. Like, it is so well cast. It is insanely well cast. And I don't know. It's just, Eric Selvig. I love that naked crazy man. Though he's not naked in this film. But I look forward to future nudity, as I do with all people. But, I don't know.
And Hemsworth
I love Kat Dennings.
is Thor.
Yeah.
We had a relationship with Robert Downey Jr. before Iron Man. We had a relationship with Edward Norton before The Incredible Hulk. We had no concept of who this guy was before Thor. And he embodies the Norse god. He has that ego. He has that that bravado.
Exactly.
And he's stunning in the film.
And what I love, what I really also responded to was we talk about well, it's good abs, but his arc as well. We talk about arcs throughout the whole MCU. But you look at the first scene right before he's going to be declared king. Like he's filled with all this hubris, this ego, the bravado that you talked about.
I know what's right.
He knows what's right, and even before he gets cast out by Odin, he calls his father a fool, and he gets cast out. And then when he tries to pick up Mjolnir and he can't do it. Like he gets humbled, and he has so he goes through this arc where he has to go down to kind of be built back up towards the end of that film. So I like the arc that he himself, Thor, has to go through from just like I said, being humbled from his ego and then coming into who he is meant to be. So I think it's an interesting arc that he has in that film as well.
I also think there's something interesting about the concept of back home I'm famous. You know what I mean? That adds something to the fish out of water story, and I think adds to his romance with Jane Foster, where it's just like, as he was growing up, he was always known, and now he's a weirdo, and I think throughout the films we see like that his being a weirdo humbles him, but also amuses him. I don't know. It's interesting.
To go to your humor point, I think it is essential to selling the absurdity of Asgard and as a character like this. You need to put a god of thunder in a diner saying, "Another!" You need to have...
Or him getting stuck with a needle in his butt when he's trying to say son of Odin.
I am the mighty! You need that stuff because you have to tip your hat to, like, we're going crazy now.
Yeah, true.
Join us.
True.
But it still keeps that science element that ties it back to the groundedness of Iron Man. Mm-hmm. So it's building on that stepstone of, if Iron Man can exist, then maybe the Hulk can exist, then maybe there's a place in space where gods can exist.
Yeah, they do a good job of really tying, even with just small lines like Coulson when the Destroyer comes up and you have all of Agent S.H.I.E.L.D. He's like, is this one of Stark's?
Yeah, Agent Sitwell, right? Isn't that Sitwell's first appearance too? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sitwell, okay. But Coulson was the one who said that.
Coulson is, and then Sitwell's like, is this one of Stark's?
Okay.
He's like, oh, I don't know. What Stark doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
So I generally love Thor. And before this rewatch, it was the film leading up to the Avengers that I enjoyed the most. But I'll put a button on that.
But the stuff on the bridge was really good too. On the Bifrost Bridge.
Oh yeah.
At the end, that was really. I mean, visually that was stunning too.
Ultimately the thing I come away with watching Thor is Chris Hemsworth, perfect. Tom Hiddleston, perfect. And it does all the heavy lifting of motivation for the Avengers, so that when Joss Whedon shows up, he can just have fun with Loki, and Tom Hiddleston can just twirl his mustache. Yeah. You know, it is absolutely the most crucial film in the build up to the Avengers, outside of maybe Iron Man.
Yeah. All right.
So let's go back in time.
So but outside of any other film, maybe Incredible Hulk, maybe. I don't think there's another film that gets more shit in the MCU than Iron Man 2.
I think it's 3 movies, right? People usually put Dark World, Iron Man 2, and Incredible Hulk on the bottom of their rankings.
Yeah. And I don't understand why. Iron Man 2 is so much fun. It picks up perfectly from the last Iron Man film, but then it also expounds upon that part of Tony's nature where he's just like basically his hubris, like his I'm number one, and I'm not saying like we're at world peace right now because of me, but we are, like his Stark Expo. Yeah.
Like if Iron Man 1 had not ended with I am Iron Man, and he had found humility by the end of that film, Iron Man 2 would be a totally different thing. Mm-hmm. Iron Man 2 picks up I am Iron Man, and it's his ego run amok.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy that aspect of it, but it feels like we're getting a lot of the Tony Stark isms that we kind of get on the surface level, and I don't feel like this movie goes deeper into his character as much as the first film.
I disagree.
Really?
I think it does. I think it really trashes Tony Stark. I think he goes to some really disgusting depths. I mean, he pisses in the Iron Man suit. And when you are so excited about this character coming off of the first film, you don't want to see, your hero behaving this way. But that's the appeal for me of Tony Stark, is he is a deeply flawed person who, loves the smell of his own stink.
And then I also like the, something that wasn't necessarily in the first or even the third Iron Man is the business about him being poisoned by the arc reactor. So it was one of the first times that Tony is forced to look at his mortality. So it's almost like another kick in the ass from that conversation in the cave. Like, you had this whole learning point in this cave. Now you're going through this thing and you're potentially going to die. Like, what have you learned? Like, what if this was your last day on Earth? Like, what are you going to do with that potential that you promised to make good on? You know what I mean? So I like that you had that continuation of him having to examine it. Now, whether or not that was just in there, as a really easy plot device or throwaway plot device.
No, because we see it. I mean, it's not concluded in this film even.
Right. Well, because they do have like the antidote thing that they give him, but I still think that I like that element because it just gives layers to him. So in the beginning, so while you see these are things you go back and pick up on rewatch. So the first time you see him in that Stark Expo, he's all ego, all bravado, all hubris.
He steps out of the armor right into his tuxedo he's wearing underneath.
Exactly. But that same guy who's doing that, at that point, he's already aware of that poison in him.
He's rotting away.
Yeah, so for me as a viewer upon rewatch, to me, that just adds, another level of complexity because it's, okay, so, what's behind this show right here? Is this I got too much pride to admit that I'm dying, or I'm going to put on a good show for the people, or so there's so much stuff going on with Tony just within Iron Man 2. And I think that I think it's a fine addition and a stepping stone to his character art in subsequent films.
And it's proving yet again that he cannot solve everything. He cannot rely solely on himself. His brain will, put A and B together, but he doesn't realize that when C comes up, it's going to be a problem, right? Yeah. Whether it's his heart, whether it's Ultron, whether it's Anton Vanko.
Right.
I also think it speaks to his addictive personality. Like, he's addicted to being a hero, and he will be a hero and get this kind of attention even if it kills him.
Yeah, and I really enjoy the villainy on display in Iron Man 2.
Yeah.
I love Mickey Rourke's grotesque monstrosity Whiplash and how he represents kind of like this Venom-like character, this anti-Iron Man. But then you also have the anti-Tony Stark in Justin Hammer. In fact, I think all the villains in Iron Man are anti-Starks, right? Whether it's Obadiah Stane, Hammer, Vanko, or the Mandarin, Guy Pearce thing.
But even Rhodey, when he becomes
War Machine,
he's kind of an anti-Tony Stark in a different way.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
Everybody is just a version of Tony Stark in this movie. Oh my God. He's the most egomaniacal person. He just turns everybody around him into him.
No.
He turns Pepper Potts into him. She becomes the CEO that he can't be.
Yeah.
Everybody becomes him. Yeah. Except for Scarlett Johansson. She becomes...
So Scarlett Johansson, she's introduced, Natasha Romanoff is introduced in Iron Man 2. Lisa, as far as up until this point, Pepper was in the first Iron Man.
It's been a real sausage party.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on, firstly, the casting of Scarlett Johansson and her introduction as a character, which is only hinted at in this film, I might add. But what are your thoughts about that character's introduction?
I think that her introduction was a little bit fumbled.
Terrible.
Oh. Yeah. It was fumbled. It was for sure fumbled. Because it was like, it was extremely shallow. Like, her number one weapon was how hot she is and how she can bend underneath a rope in an attractive fashion. And her being this kind of distraction from Tony Stark's relation with Pepper Potts, I guess kind of interesting because, you know, he does have this reputation of having like philandering ways and stuff like that. And Pepper Potts has always been like this kind of, you know, stable person in his life. But like, to me, she just like, she wasn't really a character. She was just like another, I
mean, she is a distraction, right? I mean, she is sent there to spy as an agent of Fury on what Stark is doing. So I kind of understand it narratively. But is
it the most interesting narrative possible for a female superhero? I think not.
And, you know, her eventual reveal in the donut shop of being a Black Widow, an agent, she doesn't really get to do anything as Black Widow until like the last 10 minutes when she goes looking for Vanko, and Vanko turns out not to be there. So she's basically thrown a bone, an action bone, to kick a little ass and, you know, show up happy. And I like that scene, but it is a character that will only get better in subsequent movies. Thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah, and eventually, hopefully, gets her own movie.
Yeah, because when I was watching it this most recent time and her character's introduced, just what she's given to do within the context of a scene, just
bend over,
just
sit on
narratively
laps,
and stuff.
It didn't
feel like they had planned for her to be in subsequent films, like to a big degree. Like it really felt like because you could have just nicknamed that character something else. I mean, not nickname. You could have named that character something else, and there wouldn't have been any difference in the plot. So I think that for me, it felt like, okay, that's a cute Easter egg that her name's Natasha Romanoff.
By Iron Man 2, they are really trying to build to an Avengers. Yeah. So they are stuffing Iron Man 2 with Marvel content. You know, the stories around Iron Man 2 also, though, are the script is constantly changing, that they are actually filming with a lot of improv. And I think you certainly can feel it. But ultimately, where I come down on this movie is I do have a really good time with it. Mm-hmm. Is it the best introduction of Black Widow? No. Is it, you know, my favorite version? Is this how I wanted Rhodey to be entered into this story? Probably not. But because I'm enjoying so much of the ego run amok story of Tony Stark, and because I'm enjoying the Hammer and the Whiplash and the Senator hearing, you know, the government oversight. I love all that stuff. Yeah. And I love Tony Stark getting the newsreel of his dad and having that conversation with Howard Stark through this old footage.
Yeah.
I dig it. I mean, I have a good time. Is it my favorite Marvel movie? No, but I don't think it's as bad as Dark World, Darren.
There's still stuff in that movie that I would like to see come back. I would love to see Justin Hammer come back.
Yeah. He does come back apparently in a Marvel one-shot. Yes. I had forgotten this, and somebody on Twitter had reminded me. The Mandarin one-shot.
And they use his tech in Luke Cage.
Oh, yeah.
That's my favorite one-shot.
The Mandarin one?
Yeah,
that's a pretty good
badass.
one.
Yeah. All right. So now after this, we have
Thor. Let's talk about it again.
Thor.
Let's talk about it some more.
So Chris Hemsworth, those abs.
He is so hot.
Yep.
2011 was the 1-2 punch of the double beefcake, right? It was Chris Hemsworth and Chris Evans, and it was all about abs and muscles. And, you know, that is certainly something that Tony Stark and Bruce Banner could not contribute to the MCU in their respective films.
Yeah. After Thor, we have the first Avenger, Captain America. So it seemed, I guess, especially where their two relationship, the relationship between these two characters would go, like in subsequent films. You have it started with Tony's introduction, and right before we wrap up with the Avengers and have everyone meet, we introduce Captain America, Steve Rogers. Directed by Joe Johnston.
Yep,
if
the
I'm not mistaken. Rocketeer.
Jurassic Park 3.
This was our Comic-Con film, our first year at Comic-Con.
Yeah. I fell asleep.
You had a migraine.
I had a migraine.
Yeah. I remember coming out of that screening feeling underwhelmed.
Yeah.
this was a film, I think, more than any other in the MCU that has grown on me over time.
Same.
And I don't even know if I could say it has a lot to do with Chris Evans and his growth with that character in the subsequent films. But I mean, I think even on its own merits, I guess I don't know where it's if I'm in a different place or if I'm taking into consideration, Captain America's place in the MCU when I'm rewatching the first Avengers. If I'm doing that thing like when I'm picturing Steve Rogers in this movie and then thinking about him in another film and where that character goes.
I think absolutely. I don't, again, like with the original Iron Man, if this had been a one and done of Captain America, it would be disappointing. I think what this film does so right is the origin of Steve Rogers is all the skinny Steve stuff. Yeah. But the World War II elements of the film are lackluster. They are all told primarily in a couple montages. Yeah. And, I was hoping, because it was Joe Johnston, the guy who did The Rocketeer, that we were going to have this really exciting World War II adventure film. And it ended up not being that. Yeah. First Avenger gets better in the context of Avengers, Winter Soldier, Age of Ultron, and Civil War. And in the conflict of ideologies between Tony Stark and Steve Rogers.
Yeah. In this film, we also have the introduction of Agent Carter, which would go on to have a short life at her own series, 2 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was just 2 seasons. But as far as her character and how it's handled in the film, what are your thoughts on Agent Carter?
She's fine. I mean,
I like her a lot.
I like her. I love the scene in the bar where she's in the red dress, and the whole conversation about getting a rain check on a dance, and I definitely buy into their relationship, but it's certainly not the stuff that I get the most excited about with First Avenger. It's all the New York City stuff.
Yeah, Brian, you said you like Agent Carter a lot.
I do. I love the relationship between Agent Carter and Steve Rogers. Just you can really see the chemistry between them, even before this. The experiment before when he's Skinny Steve, you can even see that when they have that conversation going to.
She finds him adorable.
Yeah, and even when he becomes a beefcake, of course she's attracted to him, but I think there's something there, and you can see it building throughout the course of this relationship. And people talk about Tony Stark and Pepper Potts. Like Agent Carter and Steve Rogers, I think probably has some of the best chemistry that I've seen, especially in Phase One. I took to that relationship a lot. I really did.
Okay. Hugo Weaving as Red Skull.
So badass. Yeah. Like such a great villain.
Yeah.
Like, and the idea of Hydra, like that is something that reaps a lot of rewards. The setting of something like this evil has existed for this long and longer is fascinating. That's
one of my, I think for me, the rewatch of Captain America felt like a payoff in light of the Winter Soldier, because like what Lisa just said, in the Winter Soldier, you have Hydra's infiltration of S.H.I.E.L.D., but going back to rewatch Captain America, the first Avenger, it's cool seeing them way back then and then thinking ahead into the future how they're going to become stronger and then infiltrate, and adapt to modern times. So that was one of the things that we're afforded with something like the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, to me, to that point, going back to who Steve Rogers is at the beginning of the film, he comes from a family line where his dad died in the trenches of World War I. His mom died as a nurse in a tuberculosis ward. He's a serviceman. He wants to give back to his country, and he sees all these people going off to war and giving up their lives. He wants to contribute too. Little Timmy is collecting scrap metal. What can Steve Rogers do? And nobody will give him a chance. Mm-hmm. And it's what It's what Professor Erskine sees in him. Tony oh my God,
Stanley Tucci.
Stanley Tucci. Thank you. I was going to tell me Shalhoub. That's not right. Stanley Tucci. You know, that relationship is what gets me.
Yeah.
You know, emotionally.
That scene before where they have the drink in his bunker, and he talks to him about, you know, a weak man knows the value of strength. You know, and that exemplifies Steve Rogers at that moment.
Right.
Know, so,
and you know, as Captain America, and that's the thing about this film is Marvel has to sell you on this patriotic mascot, right? And so that when we get to the Avengers, we can still be excited about, you know, old-fashioned ideals, as Coulson calls them. You know, and you know, Steve Rogers, he's fighting the good fight. He's fighting against Nazis and Hydra. This is pure evil. There's no one on the planet will argue if Hitler was a bad dude, right? We all agree that guy's got to go down.
Yeah.
It's a very black and white war. So that when we get to the Avengers, and particularly when we get to the Winter Soldier, and we can see how the world has become incredibly gray, this man with black and white morality struggles. And so this, in the same way that Iron Man is made retroactively interesting, so is the first Avenger.
Yep. So
that ending scene makes me cry every time, though, when he's bringing the plane down. And,
He's going to miss that dance.
They make that date. I'm just like weeping.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we have a post-credit scene.
Kind of. Because the post-credit scene of First Avengers is a trailer for the Avengers.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, again, like the post-credit scene that didn't happen in The Incredible Hulk, there was supposed to be a post-credit sequence in First Avenger of contemporary Captain America, you know, the Times Square sequence, but they pushed it forward before the credits.
Yeah.
And I love that moment, you know, to where he's standing in Times Square and he's like, I missed a date, or I had a date.
Yeah.
Punch in the heart.
So good.
Man, that brings us to
the
Avengers.
Oh, wow. And like that's the thing. For me, my enjoyment of Captain America, Thor, Iron Man 2, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, I liked all those movies, but none of them made my top 10 lists. They weren't anything that I thought was special.
Yeah.
But Avengers takes all these characters, and not only from a narrative standpoint, but from like a screenplay standpoint. Like Joss Whedon gets these characters better than any of those other directors before him.
Yeah. Especially in a group dynamic and how to be able. I mean, you have to. I mean, think about that. Like you have these very strong individual personalities, very unique personalities. That cannot be an easy task to write a scene where you have all of them on equal footing. You know, because you have Tony Stark, who, let him tell it, he's the smartest man in the world, definitely the smartest in the room. You have someone like Steve who will not put ego before people, and you have someone like Banner who is
tortured.
And you have someone like Thor. Yeah, you're the smartest person in the room, but I'm a freaking god. I'm a demigod, like, so I don't care. But you have all of them in the same room, and we have to want to stay in that room. We have to be interested in what they're saying. We have to believe in what they're saying to each other. And I think that paying attention to what was established in each of the solo films, while also elevating it and making them the Avengers. Because you were Thor, yes, you were Iron Man, yes, you were in the Incredible Hulk. But in this story, in this context, in this film, you have to be the Avengers, and the Avengers should have a different voice than Iron Man by himself, than Thor by himself. And Joss Whedon did that.
And Joss Whedon also found a Black Widow that was interesting.
Yeah.
He found a Banner and a Hulk that was interesting.
Yeah.
And I was going to say he found Hawkeye that was interesting. He's still working out the Clint Barton in that first Avengers.
Yeah.
But he's certainly more interesting in Avengers than he was in his non-scene in Thor.
Yeah. So, Lisa, do you remember your first time watching the film and your initial takeaways besides, oh, shit, this is just awesome?
I was super excited that it was going to be a Joss Whedon film.
Yeah.
Because I'm a tremendous Joss Whedon fan. I love Buffy. I love Angel. I love Firefly. And I just love his voice. But I think through all of the works of all of those different series, also, you know, his experience with comic books, you know, writing X-Men and Runaways and all of that stuff, like, he understands the language.
He loves the characters.
And he's really good at going, this character is like this. So it's almost like once you have how all of the characters are in any moment of time, it's kind of like, you know, almost like physics. Like, you know, like you put these characters in this room and you have this event happen. Well, this person would go this way, and this person would go that way, and this person would go this way, and then they would bump into each other, and they would cascade off in this direction. So I think that it's just that mapping of, okay, put these guys in a room. What's the chemistry? Who's going to say what? Who's going to hurt who's
going to like who? Who's going to not like who?
Yeah, and I think that like to me, seeing, because I was introduced to these characters through these films, and I had started reading comic books, you know, through being in, like, I'm literally sitting amidst comic books, so it's hard to like not trip over one and have my face fall into a comic book. But also, like, you know, in that time I had started a comic book club, and I was reading comic books every month. So to see it culminate in this kind of comic booky way, like, even the idea of, like, before I started reading comic books, like, the idea of, it would be really weird if I was reading, you know, Ramona Quimby, age 8, and then all of a sudden she's talking to Emily of A New Moon. Like, it's just like shared universes were like so like weird to me. Yeah. And then to kind of be learning about it through comics, and then to finally see it happen in a movie was it was exhilarating. It was really exciting, and I felt rewarded for putting in the effort of watching all of the movies previous. Yeah. So, and it got me excited for, oh my God, what is this going to become? You know, more chapters are promised. Where are we going to go from here? It was I felt filled with, like, you know, tremendous possibilities. I'm just like, this is so fucking cool.
Yeah. Well, because, I mean, you have to think, like, how spoiled we are, how sophisticated we are of an audience, and the amount of film history we have at our disposal. So the amount of stories that we can consume and be told. And then you get to that point where you start hearing the same stories over and over, or, you know, people doing the same thing over and over. With something like the MCU, it's providing us a new experience. Like, we don't have a precedent for anything like this. We don't have anything like this. So for us, this is an instance where it's like before, where the possibilities are endless. Because you got to think about it, before the MCU, you can always guarantee, okay, there's going to be a reboot of something. They're going to make a sequel or something. You know, we're going to have your summer blockbuster or Fast and Furious movie or whatever. But then, like, the MCU comes and says, okay, we have a story about a character who is on his own, planning on his own world, doing his own thing here. And it's a interesting character. We can tell a story from A to B. Boom, you have that. Then on the other side of the universe, there's this group of characters here meeting each other for the first time, becoming a family and whatever, blah, 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 blah. Then way in another dimension somewhere, we have this Asgardian place or whatever. And you watch all these movies and you can take them on their own. They have characters that are fully formed. They have stories that have beginning and endings. And then, like, years later, you say, okay, remember that character from that movie and this one from this movie? Like, we don't have, like, even with Star Wars, which is the biggest franchise, well, it arguably was the biggest franchise in the world, even Star Wars didn't offer something like that. And they have an expansive saga. We have, 3 sets of trilogies coming that will complete just the Skywalker clan. But Star Wars is also different because we haven't just had, like, in order for Star Wars to be like the MCU, we would have had to already have, like, a standalone Boba Fett movie.
Well,
before
Star Wars is trying to do the
but
MCU
what I'm saying,
now.
right? But I'm saying we would have had to had that before, like Return of the Jedi, and then oh shit, there's that Boba Fett character from that one movie.
But there was a precedent, and the precedent was the books. Like this, like there is no edge of the Marvel universe. There is no part where the Marvel universe is going to be done, and this is the last Marvel universe book, and Marvel universe is over.
Right.
You know, when it's over. Hey, Lindsay. When it's, I have that jacket. Oh no, I have a similar jacket. We could be twins. Like there's. With the comic books, there is no end in sight.
Right.
And we'd never had that in cinema before. It was always like, it's a trilogy, and then it's done. And every time a new like X-Men movie comes out, you're like, what? There's another one? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, you know, now we're presented with this thing that only nerds knew about. Like, only nerds knew that something like this was possible.
Yeah.
I agree with both of you, and that is, you know, obviously that's what's exciting and new about the MCU. But what I would argue about the Avengers is that Joss Whedon, he gets these characters better than anybody before him did. And if you look at all these films we were talking about beforehand, there are ups and downs to those movies. There are bumps in the road to the Avengers. And when we finally get to see all these characters interacting, in my opinion, you are seeing the right versions of these characters. You know, maybe not so much with Hawkeye. He's still trying to figure out Hawkeye. But in putting Bruce, Tony, and Steve in a room where they can argue about Nick Fury's use of Hydra technology, you get pure versions of those characters in a way that we didn't get in Favreau's Iron Man, in Leterrier's Hulk, or Johnston's Captain America.
Yeah.
And you get to see how Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are going to grate against each other's nerves. And when, you know, Captain America's like, look, he's Nick Fury, he's the government, he's the good guy, we listen to him, we shouldn't be, you know, spying on him, how dare you? And he storms out the room, and Tony Stark's like, that's the asshole that my dad wouldn't shut up about?
Yeah.
That's the exciting thing is, you know, the Loki, Chitauri, Tesseract, you know, narrative that's driving the plot is not what's exciting about the Avengers, and ultimately what's never exciting about any of the Marvel movies. And you know, when people talk about the villain problems of these films, it's because the villain problem is not, you know, that's not why I show up. I show up because I want to see how Cap and Banner interact. I show up because Thor and Hulk together on some crazy planet. I want to see that conversation.
It's like the comic books. Like you know, when you look at something like Battle World, the excitement is really just to see, okay, within the context of this story, this premise, what is T'Challa going to say to Steve Rogers? What is Doctor Strange going to say to Mr. Fantastic? It's the relationships and the interactions between these different characters, and that is why I think the Avengers work so well. I mean, yeah, it's cool that the Leviathans were coming out of space, but
what's the best moment in the Avengers, Darren?
It's when Banner turns around and speaks to the group, and not to the Chitauri, but to the people who will be with him and his team, and tells them, you know, that's my secret. I'm always angry. Like, I don't know, and you're right. Like, Joss Whedon found a way to make those characters speak to each other the way that they're supposed to.
I think there's a lot of course correction going on in Avengers, and once that course correction happens and we get to see these people interact, the MCU movies only get better.
Yeah. I think that really he did change the tone of dialogue for every Marvel movie since, with that idea of, okay, something with a lot of heart, then a joke, something heartbreaking, and then something silly. The first, and we see that again and again, and I think the first movie to break that is Thor Ragnarok, where we get a completely different voice and a completely different kind of personality, and people are like, well, what's this, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think the case with Ragnarok, that'll be one of those films that as it lives on, that's going to become.
Well, what I'm hoping is now that voice is going to be woven in, because as much as I enjoy Doctor Strange, there are things about Doctor Strange where I'm just like, okay, now I'm starting to see the code. It's time to change shit up.
Yeah.
And I think Thor Ragnarok does that. Not that we're talking about phase whatever the fuck that is. 3?
Yeah, 3.
Yeah. But yeah, the storyline between Loki and Thor continues in Avengers, and it's what gives, what would otherwise just be like some guy coming to summon down, some invaders and leading like this horde. I mean, it gives Loki, that character, as far as a villain, some weight, because there's dimension to him, because he has life outside of this film. We have our history with that character,
and you kind of get where he's coming from.
Yeah.
You've seen the shadow that he's lived under.
Yep.
You've hung out with this braggart Thor, and you're like, yeah, he's kind of a dick to Loki. But at the same time, Loki still is he does monstrous and heinous things in the Avengers. I love where they go to that gala and he rips out that dude's eyeball.
Oh yeah.
You're like, oh, that's right. Loki's still a monster.
Still a bad guy.
Let's slow down the Tumblr people.
But when we got, I have a niece who is preteen age, and when we bought her, like I asked what she wanted, and her mom said Thor Ragnarok things, pop figures. So we got her pop figures, and we got her Thor and the Hulk, because I'm like, those are the ones I'd want. And she's opening the Hulk one and going, please be Loki, please be Loki, please be Loki.
Oh.
And it wasn't.
It was not Loki.
Sorry.
Breaking hearts.
Yeah, already. Man. So.
But she likes a troubled gentleman. Yeah, my niece.
Be careful.
He's ripped out eyeballs. I don't think she's seen that movie. Okay. I think Thor Ragnarok might be her first Marvel movie.
At the end of this particular film, so we had spent so many years just getting to this moment. And it's one of those things, like, once it happens, then you're like, okay, now what? Like, what?
I really did not think it was going to be this good. When we walked into that Thursday midnight screening, this is, we all watched this together. And this is still one of my all-time favorite screenings.
Yeah.
Seeing that Hulk and actually watching Darren see that Hulk, that was such a pure and shocking moment.
Yeah.
Again, based on what I had previously seen in Phase One, I didn't think it was going to be this good.
Yeah.
And, you want to hold on to, like, that feeling, and you're like, gosh, I hope they can keep this going in Iron Man 3, Dark World, Winter Soldier, Guardians, and Age of Ultron.
Because what we were talking about earlier with Iron Man 1 and with Thor, how they were trying to keep things grounded.
Yeah, that's done.
They were trying to be careful with that.
This is comic book land.
Yeah, and even in Thor, trying to relate magic to science. But Avengers, they just went full tilt in comic books. You have the Chitauri, you have these wormholes opening in space.
I love those Chitauri. I love the design, that little mask that they wear that they pull off to scream.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Battle of New York action sequence is certainly the best action sequence of the MCU so far in Phase One. They put a lot of money into New York, blowing up.
Blowing that shit
up. I love Thor on top of the Empire States Building, calling down the thunder and lightning.
As a non-action person, I enjoy the action in it because there's character development going on through the action to keep me engaged. Because when I get to fight scenes, me, I tend to okay, well, just tell me who wins, and then I start thinking about something else. But they continue the character development and the dialogue and all of that wonderfulness throughout the action scenes.
Yeah.
Which is something that's maintained through the Marvel films. That is something that they see succeed in this film and continue it throughout.
And when I look back on that first watch, while we're experiencing the Chitauri, and there are a couple moments where Loki is mind teleported off to some space rock to talk to this crazy alien guy. When I'm watching it, I'm not anticipating, well, who's actually running all this? So that when we get to the end, I mean, are we there? Can we talk about the end?
Yeah.
When we get to the end and we get to that first mid-credit sequence and Thanos is revealed.
I'm like, who's that?
You were like, who that? When I saw Thanos, that was a bigger mind blow than Nick Fury in offering the Avengers Initiative.
Yeah.
Because that was Marvel saying, okay, we are going to do the comic books. We are going deep.
Yeah.
We're going out there.
Yeah. I remember that moment. And again, like Brian said, I still couldn't imagine, even then, couldn't imagine us being not even a whole week away from seeing like Black Panther, like leading into Infinity War, like just what that would look like. The Doctor Strange film, like, you know, integrating. Think about even back then, the integration of Tom Holland's Peter Parker into the MCU,
yeah, no way,
done to perfection in that way, or even the Civil War storyline. Like, you know, that was just, I don't know. It's just amazing to think that, you know, the Avengers was an event film that was years in the making, but then like when that happened, we weren't even at the summit yet. It was just, that wasn't even it. That's not the end game, and we still had more comic book films to go. And each time they do it, you know, they're breaking new ground. With the Guardians of the Galaxy, now we have this cosmic area of the MCU, which has opened up, you know, storytelling possibilities that introduction of characters that are even more obscure than the Guardians were, which is exciting because we didn't know, like Lisa said, like it wasn't even just unique to Lisa, but not too many people knew who Iron Man was before he came out. And Thor I would say he was a moderately known comic book character.
He had appeared on The Incredible Hulk for an episode.
Right, but like he's a household name now.
Yeah.
So if Marvel could do that with that tier of comic book characters, and if they can push obscure characters like Guardians to the forefront, then like the mind just reels at what they could do with all the other characters that they have waiting in the wings.
Brian, you know, you mentioned when you were talking about the Captain America gravitating towards the solo stories. So what about this rewatch of the Avengers? You weren't like as excited about the Avengers as these other movies in Phase One?
No, Avengers. I still like it. I don't. Yeah, I there's other stuff I gravitate to in the Avengers other than just kind of my memory of watching it for the first time. Like the rewatch, I enjoyed it, but it felt kind of slow in the beginning for me.
That opening sequence is not the best. The shield sequence is,
it felt kind of slow for me. So I don't know. The thing that I really kind of gravitated to was seeing them really planting the seeds between Scarlett Johansson and Black Widow and the Hawks. Relationship that you start to see come forward in Age of Ultron, and seeing where that could possibly go moving forward, especially with that opening scene when she goes to try to recruit him, and that whole conversation between the two of them, and you know, she's like, you know, I came here alone, and he, you know, tries to scare her, and she pulls the gun, and you see how frightened she is, and that plays more into the scene on the helicarrier between the two of them down below.
And it's an interesting setup for what happens to those characters in Age of Ultron, too.
Yeah. So I really gravitated towards, and I thought Scarlett Johansson, she's given a lot more to do in this film, like we talked about from Iron Man 2. So I really, and even the scene she has with Loki, getting the information for why he's why he's really on the ship, you know, is to really unleash the Hulk on the ship. So I thought all of that was just really, really intriguing. I loved all those type of setups, and like you say, there's those interactions between the characters. I mean, the film, it doesn't excite me as much as it did in 2012. I mean, I still love the characters. It's still one of my favorites. I'm sure we'll get to ranking soon.
No, I forgot. You got to do that real quick.
But yeah, it didn't hit me the same way. But I still love the film.
All right. So 6 weeks from now, we'll be done with Phase 2.
6 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the films coming up in Phase 2?
Iron Man 3 is next.
Yeah.
Thor: The Dark World after that. Then Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Guardians of the Galaxy. Age of Ultron, and it concludes with Ant-Man.
Ant-Man.
I like not jumping ahead, but that phase, I like the movies more. I like the lineup better than the first phase.
Same, absolutely.
Yeah.
To me, it's the theme of this episode has been retroactively. I have grown to really appreciate and love the Phase One movies.
Yeah.
But it was always like Avengers is the launching point for my undying love for the MCU.
Yeah.
But my favorite films are still to come.
Yeah.
But that being said, Brian, it seems like you're ready to go to rank. You got your list out.
Damn.
I do. So I guess from bottom to top.
We're just talking Phase One.
Because I'm actually on Letterboxd and I'm ranking them as I watch them. So Iron Man 3 will go on this list after I watch it this upcoming week. But yeah, so all the Phase One films, what I have right now is bottom to top, Iron Man 2, Thor, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, Avengers, and then Captain America, the first Avengers. Yes, the Turtle Dork hot take at me, bro.
Okay. Bottom to top. Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, Avengers.
All right. My hot take, bottom to top.
Oh, shit.
Iron Man on the bottom.
Boo!
Yes.
Damn.
Boo.
Iron Man on the bottom. Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, the first Avenger, and then the Avengers.
Damn. Okay. All
Okay,
right.
Darren.
Huh? What happened?
Yeah, you got to do yours now, and then we're going to say "damn" at yours.
Oh no! All right, my number from bottom to top.
You
Iron
should mix
Man.
it up.
Yeah.
Aw.
No.
Yeah. Oh.
Captain America: The First Avenger.
Oh.
Then Iron Man. Then
Boo.
Thor. Then Iron Man 2. No. Then Incredible Hulk. Then Iron Man 2. Then the Avengers.
All right. Okay. All right.
Okay.
You know, again, I enjoyed all of these films much more.
There are
on
top
this
6 of
rewatch.
Phase One.
Yeah.
But Iron Man's at the bottom for me because what's exciting about the MCU is what comes after. And it is a setup, and it's done really, really well. But it feels like a bygone era.
I agree.
I just
know
love
Darren.
Robert Downey Jr. I just love
Yeah,
him.
he's great.
He's great.
He's
It's
great.
going to be
He's
hard.
even better in Iron Man 2.
When they have to phase him out, I don't know. I'm very curious to see how that goes. 'Cause I
know.
can't.
We'll see.
But, you know, like,
We'll see what happens.
I think he's going to be hanging on the periphery at the very least. I'm still holding out for an Iron Man 4 after Avengers 4.
do you think there will be, like, an end of the Marvel universe where they're like, this is the huge event and we're wrapping this shit up and no more Marvel movies?
Especially now that they're acquiring Fox. I don't think we're going to see
It's
that.
just going to be a monster that lives forever.
I think you're going to certainly see some recastings probably, but we've experienced that before for the better. The one name, we didn't talk about either Terrence Howard or Don Cheadle, but, that recasting happened. I'm cool with it.
Yeah, but
Upgrade.
those are secondary characters.
How dare you say War Machine's a secondary character, sir? He's an Avenger, and he's awesome.
Is he?
Well,
Yes,
because,
he is.
because
Oh, yeah, he is.
the MCU, at least right now, is headed by Kevin Feige. Because Kevin Feige comes from a comic book background. Because a huge part of the success of the MCU is Kevin Feige staying so close to the comic book roots when translating these characters. Even thinking and planning ahead, I don't foresee it being a situation where Kevin Feige wouldn't do like a new reboot, like those event things.
Kevin Feige dies.
Oh, damn, B. Well, until then, I mean,
he's not gonna.
Oh, okay. Maybe he put a plan in place in the event of my demise. Execute phase this, and so I don't know, but I think comic books every once in a while. For listeners who don't know, there will be like these huge events that happen. Like DC had the New 52, then they're doing the Rebirth. So they'll have these events where they basically hit a reset button, and they have artists and writers write new stories, new origin stories for characters that launch off a different sort of timeline for this character, and then they just rinse and repeat. So it happens every few years. So I don't see the MCU being above that. Especially when it gets to the point where, like, logistically, these, continuity.
It'll just be, is the cinema world ready?
Yeah.
And
And I say yeah. And if you're not, too bad.
I mean, Westerns were like the only movies for like 100 years. So I think that we can do superhero for 100 years.
Yeah, I could. So do we have any comments from our listeners we want to
sure
address?
do.
All right.
Starting first with a one-time guest, Matt Herms.
Yay.
The current colorist of The Hunger, the Archie book, The Hunger. Jughead's a werewolf.
What?
Yep, Jughead's a werewolf. No. And Matt's coloring his adventures. Matt says, do you guys recollect your initial reactions to castings in Phase One? Any doubts or misgivings? For me, I doubted Chris the Human Torch Evans, as well as the Ruffalo recast. After seeing them on screen, totally turned around on that opinion.
I think most of the announcements. Of course, Robert Downey Jr. because where he was coming from. Chris Evans was a surprise because there was a big talk about who's going to play Captain America. They had all these different names. I remember John Krasinski was on that list, and Chris Evans wasn't even on the list. And then all of a sudden, he gets he gets cast in that role. And I think it was, from what the story I heard, he came in to just look at some production art. Joe Johnston was doing some production art, and he came in to look at it. And all of a sudden, after a couple of weeks, I think he did like a casting call or something. He ended up getting the role, which I thought was odd, just the way he kind of got. But he's now looking at it, he's perfect as Captain America. But yeah, those are the only two.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was excited about Iron Man because of Robert Downey Jr., because of what we were saying. Zodiac, Brothers Bloom, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang before this. Chris Evans, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wasn't a huge Chris Evans fan, although I really liked Cellular. I still like Cellular, the David E. Ellis classic. And Ruffalo, oh my God, I loved Ruffalo. I was super excited about that.
Yeah.
I said Brothers Bloom for Robert Downey Jr., but I was thinking of Ruffalo. So no, I mean, I think what Marvel does so well is the casting.
Yeah.
Chris Hemsworth, I had no idea who he was. Tom Hiddleston, I had no idea who he was. Anthony Hopkins, he's a great Odin. They cast well.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope that satisfies you, Matt. And then at LeoraKitty78 on Twitter says, can I get away with not showing Natasha the Incredible Hulk? That's her daughter. We started the MCU watch today from the beginning, and I would rather go straight from Iron Man 1 to Iron Man 2.
Damn.
No,
You
watch
can, but should you? No.
I mean, there were years that I would skip it.
Yeah.
Because at the time, there was nobody from the Incredible Hulk still around in the MCU. But the moment William Hurt comes back as Ross in Civil War, sorry, you got to watch Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, you do.
And there's entertaining shit about that movie. There's things I like about that movie.
Yeah.
And then we also on Twitter from at Mr. Coin Laundry.
Yay.
Dustin.
He says, the Netflix shows, the relation to the movies, do you think the Defenders will ever be in the movies, even as cameos?
No.
Nope.
I hope not.
Oh.
No, I don't want them to show up. They're not good.
Oh.
There's episodes that are fine, but they're nowhere near as good as what's happening in the MCU. They don't feel at all connected to the MCU outside of like a few newspaper clippings and some crappy references to the Battle of New York.
Yeah.
But they just don't. They feel like separate entities. And frankly, I don't even believe in the existence of S.H.I.E.L.D. Agent Coulson, I watch Avengers. That dude's dead. All right? He does not come back.
Oh, man. You know what? I used to argue this to the high heavens that, oh, man, the Netflix series, those characters, they're going to be in, like, the Avengers Infinity War. They're going to be in the movie. But, like, especially with the recent release of, like, The Punisher and even The Defenders, like, I don't even care anymore. Like, like you said, Brad, they've done so good a job of distancing themselves. I mean, they try, it feels like haphazard how they try to maintain some connectivity with like the MCU. But again, like you say, but outside of a mention of, the event that happened in New York, like they don't do a good job of making it feel connected to the point where I actually even want to see them.
I think the moment Kevin Feige and Ike Perlmutter separated, Kevin Feige was like, you do your TV thing, I do my movie thing.
Yeah.
They're, They are totally separate.
Yeah. And it just sucks because if they were done differently, they're in an alternate universe
Where they were good.
There's a movie where fucking Power Man and Jessica Jones are, fighting alongside Thor or T'Challa, and but we are not there yet. So sorry.
And that's how we end the Phase One review cast.
Yay!
Yay.
I'm excited. We're a few days away from Black Panther, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
I'm
calling in sick to work.
I got my outfit ready.
Don't tell the internet that.
They don't know. You can edit that out, Darren, right?
Yes, I can.
But will he? That's the question.
Don't do it.
Oh, okay. I won't. So I'm super excited. I'm ready. I got my outfit ready. I got my Black Panther shirt came in.
Yeah.
On time.
I hope we don't have the same one. That would be awkward.
I hope we do. Unity.
That's like showing up at the prom with the same dress.
Oh yeah, I'll just have to give my shirt to Brad. He can wear my shirt.
I've got my own Black Panther shirt.
No, then y'all can be twinsies if she.
Oh, okay.
All right. Yeah. So listeners, hit us up on social media at ItModcast. Join us. Not too late to join us at least for the second phase of the MCU.
6 weeks from now.
6 weeks from now, we will be reviewing Phase 2. You can follow us on Twitter at ItModcast, on Instagram at ItModcast, and on Facebook at ItModcast.
And tune in for our Oscars preview cast with special guest Lindsay Thomas.
She's here. She's
She's
waiting
my
in the
friend.
wings.
She's sitting right there, and we're starting late. We're running 10 minutes late because we love the Avengers
Because
so much.
Brian got here 10 minutes late. Remember?
Oh, yeah, that too. I had already forgiven him. But clearly Darren has not.
You can follow him at The Turtle Dork on Twitter, Instagram at The Turtle Dork 1, and Letterboxd at, what are you? Are you on Letterboxd?
Turtle Dork.
Yeah, that guy. Wife Dork is at Sidewalk Siren on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd. Brad Gullickson is at Mouth Dork on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
Oh my God!
I'm starting Facebox.
You can only go on that in incognito window.
Facebook. Wow. All right.
It's a lot like the movie Chatterbox, if you've seen it.
Sorry. You can follow him at Mouth Dork on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Untapped at Mouth Dork. I'm Darren Smith, the Disco Dork on all social medias. That's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. And until next time.